Welcome to Geared for Growth. I'm your host, Mike Mortlock, Managing Director of MCG Quantity Surveyors, your tax depreciation experts. Today, we have a very special and highly credentialed author in the mix. We're talking to Max Phelps. Now, he's the founder of Golden Egg Home Loans and multiple best-selling author. And today we're talking about some of the concepts from his book, Spending Fast and Slow. And the topic is, how do we slow down our spending in 2024? Now, as property investors, of course, we need to look attractive to a bank. And many of us may be looking to replace our income with the passive income from a property portfolio. But Max speaks to us about some key concepts that can really get in the way of achieving what we're trying to do there. He gives us some great insights and some tips about how to regain control of our spending and share some really interesting data on the state of financial literacy and spending in Australia. It's an awesome interview that will also include a link to get a copy of his book for free. It's an amazing interview, and I learned personally a lot from Max, and I'm sure you will as well. Here's Max. Max Phelps, thanks for joining me on Geared for Growth.
Mike, thanks so much for having me. I'm absolutely chuffed to bits to be on talking to you.
Well, that's very kind of you to say. I've been a fan of yours for quite some time, and your publisher actually made the connection, and it sort of seems weird because we've been communicating outside of that, and it took a professional to actually make this happen, which we could have easily done ourselves. But I'm really looking forward to this interview because I think there's some really fundamental things that might at first glance not seem to be about property investing per se, but I think are just inextricable from property investing, and that's our relationship with money, with saving. So the topic of this is how to slow down our spending in 2024. I wonder if you wouldn't mind starting with the idea that perhaps some people will have in their head is like, okay, here's a guy that's going to tell me that I'm spending too much money and I need to save more and all the funds going to go down the drain. And, like, do I really need this, or can I just carry on as I'm going? 'Cause, I'm having a great time.
Yeah, so and I have this conversation with people all the time. And what we find is that when people say, "But I love my life," and I say, "Okay, that's interesting. Which bits of it do you love?" And they'll say, "Oh, well, I love going out with friends, and I love going to the movies, and I love traveling, and I love this." I said, "Brilliant. How about we focus the money on that stuff and preparing for your future so that you can buy investment properties, pay them off, do whatever you need, but reduce the amount of money that you've got available to squander on the other stuff that you do but you don't value." So, for example, it's things like the soft drinks, it's the Uber Eats, it's the clothes that we don't necessarily need, it's the gadgets that are all almost out of date before we get them. The things that we buy that end up in the garage or in under the bed somewhere until we eventually think that we need to sell them. That's the stuff that's not really what we value. And there's lots of studies showing that we don't really value most of that stuff anyway. So how can we focus that stuff? But at the end of the day, if you don't have any goals to improve your life and get ahead, well, then just spend every cent you've got. And as long as you can work until you die, you'll be fine.
Yeah, and that's a nice little way to finish, because people are kind of thinking, okay, yeah, it's my money, I want to spend it, but then it's like, oh, there will be consequences down the track, and they don't sound that groovy. But how would you rate our relationship with money and spending as a society today?
Oh, we're awful. I mean, we're terrible. Australia at the moment is spending 98.9% of our income. We're saving 1.1% and that's an average. So you can
Right.
imagine if that's the average, and there's some people are doing a brilliant job and saving, more than 20% of their income, then obviously there's going to be some people that are spending way more than they're earning. And that's quite a common thing. But and I've been through this myself. I grew up in a family of 9 kids, no money. You preserve money, you don't spend it. I was raised and trained to be a tight ass, and
Yeah.
still am today. But my wife is just like everyone else. She loves to buy stuff and have nice things and do whatever. And but on average, that just means that we're normal. And that meant that we just spent everything we earn.
Mm.
And so for the first 11 years, my income tripled. in that 11 years.
Yeah, wow.
And our savings went absolutely nowhere in
Right.
that time.
So
Um,
I often think about my own sort of career trajectory, and I think it can almost be kind of correlated to the bottles of wine that I was drinking. I started out at the $12 price range, right? And then, a few years into the career, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm an $18 man now. And I don't know,
yeah,
maybe I'm sitting sort of, in that sort of 24 to 28 as my daily quaffable. Sounds like I'm an alcoholic. I don't drink daily, but is that is that
it's
something
normal.
that you just
It's
think
so
is
normal.
right?
And we always aspire for that little bit better and that little bit more. And there's always someone willing to promote it to us and advertise it to want to take that money off us. And we do it with cars, we do it with homes, we do it with clothes, is that we just want that little bit better.
Mm,
Um, this I've got a nice t-shirt on at the moment I love. It was a gift. But otherwise, my t-shirt of choice is a $4 Kmart Onco t-shirt.
mm.
I have millions of dollars worth of property and hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank, but it's just a bloody t-shirt for Christ's
Yeah.
sake.
Yeah.
How is having some fancy ass logo on it helping me to with my life? It doesn't make me happier. Um, and it's interesting when we look at happiness and money, people don't really understand the things that make them happy. You sort of hope that what you're doing, you think overall, I'm satisfied with my life.
Mm.
Therefore, it must be some of the things that I'm doing that's doing that. But the truth is, if you actually get down with laser focus, there's very, very specific things that are making you happier and other things you're spending money on that are not actually making you any happier at all.
Mm. I think the connection between money and happiness is an interesting one because I'm not a biochemist, but I'm assuming that there's a serotonin release when you go and buy that Louis Vuitton bag or
Yeah,
that
a little bit of dopamine.
dopamine.
Yeah, dopamine. But here's the crazy thing. So, yeah, without going too far ahead, kind of thing, is that imagine this, for example, something like a Louis Vuitton bag. Let's take that as an example. And let's say one of us or our partners were dead into this Louis Vuitton bag. If they went and bought it, they get an immediate boost. They feel amazing. I've got this bag. It's fantastic. I love it. Now that dies very quickly.
Mm.
And very quickly, it's just the bag they've got. It's the bag they use. And a few friends ask them about it and they love talking about it and that'll make them feel good for a while. And then after a while, their friends all know about their bag. They know they've got the bag and it's just a thing that they've got.
Mm.
So now it's a bit sort of stale and old. And maybe what we need now is the Gucci one or another one that's that's a better version. So we get this hit. But here's the crazy thing. My wife's been working, we changed fundamentally how we manage money 20 years ago now. And that's what a lot of the book is about. And I've been coaching it ever since. But when we changed, my wife has an amount of money that comes in on the first of every month that she can just blow on whatever she wants. Okay.
Yep.
So if she wants a Louis Vuitton bag and she thinks there's a really great one, she doesn't have the money for it today, knows there's money coming on the first. So she will add it to the list.
Right.
Now, guess what happens with dopamine levels when you write that thing on your list? They spike almost identically to if she'd actually bought the item.
Wow. So I haven't been to a stationery shop for a while, but I'm guessing a pen and paper is a lot cheaper than a Louis Vuitton bag.
Exactly right. But and she's already got a phone, so she's got a phone list of like the
Right.
things she wants. So whenever it might not be a Louis Vuitton bag, but whenever she sees something she wants, it goes on the list.
Yep.
And here's the crazy thing: when the money comes in for the month, she then has to look at the list and makes a choice.
Hmm.
Of course, the most important things are then the things that have stayed on the list for more than a few days or whatever. So it wasn't just an impulse purchase, it's now a considered purchase, and now it's a comparable purchase versus other things. And if actually this month there's a birthday coming up for someone else that she knows she really wants to get them a lovely gift, that she might downplay a lot of those things on the list and buy very few of them, but then
Mm.
she'll roll them forward to the list for next month. They just stay on the list till next month. And
Yep.
after a while, some things just stay on the list and always get relegated, stay on the list and get relegated, stay on the list. And eventually it's like, yeah, don't really need that, do I? And it's a hell of a lot cheaper and easier to cross something off a list than it is to pull it out from the back of the garage or under the sofa, and go and sell it on Facebook Marketplace or eBay.
For
because you
a
realize you
third of
didn't
its
need it.
value or what have you.
Yeah. So it's
So, so
nuts.
you grew up as a self-confessed tight ass, and your
Oh,
wife,
that's out of necessity. I'm one of 9 kids. There was no money. It
there you
wasn't a
go.
question of I just chose to be a knight. No, there was no money. We didn't have money. I got
But
hand me
but
down.
but that sort of permeated your adult life, at least for a while, right? You talked about your salary tripling and you spent money, but you were still, if you grow up in that mindset, you have a different relationship with money because it's
Correct.
pretty hard to get. So there's perhaps a value differential. I'm just wondering for people that perhaps are a little bit like that and have, say, a partner. Now you've been, your wife by comparison is normal, but she's probably not a spendthrift.
Oh
But
no, she is. She's a shopaholic.
right,
She's
there you go.
a certifiable shopaholic.
So you've been able to sort of moderate her behaviors and stay married. I'm
Yes,
there's
that's exactly right. Because the
I'm
interesting
wondering.
thing is, we eliminated the arguments because every single month the credit card bill would come in and there would be an argument. You spent
Right.
how much on what? Because for me, everything was a problem, and for
Yeah.
her, oh, it's fine. And she then got to we this is back in the day where it was more common to take cash and carry cash around for things, and so she would put most stuff on the credit card, but then also draw some cash.
Mhm.
So what she would do is she'd go and get a haircut for maybe $300 and say, "Hey, listen, can you put 150 on the card and I'll give you 150 in cash?"
Right.
I'd see the credit card and go, "You spent $150 on a haircut?" She said, $150 is quite cheap. Some haircuts are $300. Knowing full well that she just literally hidden that from me to try and lessen the argument. And it's
Mm.
still, but every single month. And, you can't, and we did that for 11 years. We
Right.
got the credit card bill paid off in full at the end of every month. We never went behind because, I always made sure we were staying on top of things. But I've now read all the psychological studies on this. And I don't know if
Mm.
you know this or not, but when you read the studies, is that when people use a credit card, on average, they spend 25% more than when
Mm.
people use their own money or cash.
Mm. Now, that is just not a happy accident or an unhappy accident that's just what the world is like. I'm skeptical that this isn't a manufactured thing, right? Because there are beneficiaries in expenditure. Like Afterpay is not a humanitarian organization, and we shouldn't just pick on them because they are no different to a credit card, right? They're just in the press as the bad guy, but it's just a service.
And, and, and,
We
and
elect to use it,
actually,
right?
they're a less bad guy than a credit card,
Right.
statistically. So people tend to spend more when they've got access to Afterpay. But there's a concept in psychology they call the pain of paying. So back in the day when we had cash and you handed over some of your cash to someone else and you got something in return, you felt the pain of losing that money because you had less and they had some of your money, and you
Mm.
had the pain of paying. Credit cards take away that pain of paying because it's just like, oh yeah, tap, 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 tap. And at the end of the month, you get this conglomerated bill that you
Mm.
can't really attribute to any one thing.
Mm.
Afterpay, on the other hand, you can attribute to that one thing. And so when you're paying your Afterpay bill, you actually get the pain of paying for that thing, and you know that it was that thing that you bought, the Louis Vuitton bag or whatever it was. And so that pain is now associated with that item in a way that it's
Mm.
not with credit cards. So I'm not an advocate of Afterpay, but it's actually lesser of the evil versus credit cards, because a lot of people think, oh, but I pay my credit card off in full, I'm fine. It's like,
Mm.
oh, how cute. You think you're spending the same, don't you?
That's do,
And
do you
as soon as you ask them and you start to say, really, so you're telling me that if you had a bank account in it and you were down to your last $20, you would go and just tap it one more time, get a soft drink, buy Uber Eats and everything else when there's only $20 left, in the same way that you would with a credit card when you've got a notional spending amount for the month of, 4 grand or whatever that figure is. Are you telling me you're not going to tap the credit card one more time and get whatever you need?
Mm.
Whereas there's $20 left, you go, oh, there's only $20 left.
Mm.
Maybe if I buy something for $10 here and I keep $5 for that, and I know I'm going to want $5 for my coffee tomorrow, our brains work in our favor when we're trying to manage a limited amount of resource. And credit cards never make us do that, ever.
Mm. It's interesting how certain people have different relationships with money. I have a mate that would go to, say, a casino, right? And let's say he said, "All right, I'm going to go $100," and to me, it's kind of like dinner and show. I'm happy to sort of lose it for the entertainment and the thrill of an upside. Now, let's say he puts down a bet and he wins $100. Um, I'm of the sort of view that, like, oh, okay, well, I only wanted like 100 on the line, so I'm going to put that in my pocket and I'll play with the rest. But he was kind of like, well, I came in with that's free money. I didn't have that before, so I
Yeah,
just get to play with that now. But I'm like, well, no,
yeah.
like it's yours. It's a bit like those TV shows where it's like, do you want to gamble the 50 grand? It's like, would you gamble $50,000 of your own money from your pocket? Probably not, but
Oh
you can
no.
put this in your pocket. So what
Yeah.
is the difference? What
Yeah, so
explain
again,
to me
it's
the
another psychological.
psychology?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because we're twice as averse to risks as we are to gains. So when you put things into terms of winning, people
Hmm.
get excited about winning.
Yep.
But when you say, but you might lose, we then go, oh, what, lose? Hang on, no. And they've
Yeah.
done, without going into the specifics of it, whenever they frame a bet in the form of you're either going to lose this much or you're going to break even versus you're going to gain this much or break even, people will avoid the loss and go for the gain,
Mm,
the win.
yeah.
And when someone's got a gamble, my mum used to always say, only gamble what you can afford to lose.
Mm,
But when I know when I talk to someone, the language they use if they've got a problem with gambling is they will talk about the win. When you
right.
talk about I was going to spend $100, then to me you don't have a problem with gambling. That's just what you chose to do with your money that night. Whereas when someone says, "Oh, well, the other night there was this guy that won this da da da," and a few weeks ago I was at this thing and I won this, and when they talk only about the win, what they're
Mm,
doing is hiding the pain of the loss.
mm.
And they're chasing that next win. And that's when we know that they've got a problem with gambling and they're not just, well, I thought I'd just blow, $100 on the pokies or blow $100 at the casino, because
Mm.
we know you're blowing that money. You're walking with $100 and walking out with nothing.
Yeah.
And that's fine. That's just a choice.
Yeah. Gosh, it's very interesting. We could probably do a whole other show on that, but I want to try and bring us back to some of the concepts that would help us as property investors. So this is a property investing show after all.
Yeah, and I'm
There's,
a professional investor as well.
of
And
course.
what we were speaking about before is that so many times I hear people say, my goal with property investing is to replace my income with passive income. And I say, you can't do it. It's impossible. Because if you're earning 100 grand this year and you make 10 grand passive income, then guess what? Next year, you're earning 110 grand. And
Mm.
if your habit is to spend all of your income, you're going to spend like someone who's earning 110 grand because that's your habit. And now your goal
Yes.
is to get 110 grand's worth of income, which means you need to earn 100 grand more than the 10 grand passive you're currently making.
Yeah, because otherwise you just end up with, like me, buying those more expensive bottles of wine, and it happens. It happened to you, who grew up,
That's exactly right.
without money, and one of nine children. So if we are if we are actually in that situation where we're like, okay, well, this is actually my game plan. I want to retire in 5, 10, 20 years, and I want my passive income to be X. As that builds, do we have to sort of cordon that off as a
Yes.
untouchable kind of resource to be able to get our brain ready for that transition?
So partly yes, and partly I think what we need to do is if we reframe the goal, we get a much better outcome. If you reframe the goal as my goal is to get my passive income higher than my expenses, and that was the goal I set myself, when I was in my late 30s, and by 46, my passive income equaled my expenses. Now, after that, I was able to ratchet my expenses up because my passive income was growing. Before that, we saw with passive income was something that we quarantined away. It was to save up the next deposit. It was to save up the next pay down the debt or whatever it was we were doing. But it also then says, well, actually, let me look at my expenses, because if my expenses for the year are 50 grand and I keep them at 50 grand, well, then I'm getting ahead. But if my expenses grow from 50 grand to 60 grand, and my passive income is growing by 10, well, I'm not getting ahead, am I?
Mm,
I'm still going to have to stay on the treadmill for longer.
mm,
And so my goal with, the book Spending Fast and Slow was to try and in terms of running my life is, if we once we can control our expenses, we can then choose to increase our expenses when we want or decrease them. But the key is control. And most of us don't have a control mechanism, because most of us, all the income goes into one pot. The worst for me is when I hear someone say, "Oh, you put all your income in the offset account, put everything on the credit card, and then you'll get ahead." And it's like, that is such bullshit. That'll never, ever happen, because you're now not in control of your spending, because you're now at the mercy of everything you can think of, anything that anyone can market to you, any thought, any whim just goes on the credit card, and that's it. So you don't have any control over spending now. And people say,
mm.
"I can look back." Yeah, you can look back. I don't like to look back. I like to know today. Should I buy it today? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Without looking back, I don't do any, we do no analysis of our money. None.
Mm.
My
My
wife,
mother,
I do a budget once every 5 years.
yeah, right. I want to ask you about how we get control, but I just want to make the comment that my mother's a psychologist, and I think that psychology really sort of sprung up to help people, right? But I can assure you that the most money to be made is in convincing people to spend for things that they don't really need. And so, what hope have we got as
As
People,
humans.
yeah, people talk about that sort of monkey brain that sometimes takes over, and we still have that when we get rationally angry and those sorts of things. Um, and that monkey brain seems to be directly tapped into by all sorts of advertisements on a day-to-day
They always
basis.
have been. If you can go back to Roman times, and you can even read Socrates, and you'll see that people get tempted. There's the peddler at the market with his lovely wares and his snake oil this and his these wonderful things. There's been temptation everywhere forever. But you used to just have a physical amount of money, and you knew that physical amount of money. And when you gave some of it away, you had less, and you
Mm,
knew. And when
yes.
everyone did that, so and this is only going back for thousands of years, up until 50 years ago, people got paid in cash.
Mm,
And everybody knew that what you did with that cash, if you walked around with that cash on you, it would disappear down the pub, down the road, buying whatever. And so what you had to do is take that cash home, hide it in a drawer, hide it in an envelope, hide it under the bed, hide it in a bank
mm,
where you couldn't touch it, because you were not to be trusted with that money.
mm,
Once you walk out the door with your $20, $50, $100, you knew that you could do whatever you want with that money, but only with that money.
mm.
And if you wanted to spend more, you had to physically go home and get more.
Yeah.
Credit cards and debit cards have eliminated, that's what we call that friction. So it's the advertiser's dream is to eliminate friction from the transaction. So you can instantly access. Most people get all their pay landing into a bank account with a debit card access, or worse still, a credit card.
Mm,
That means you have instant access to your entire income, which is the equivalent of 50 years ago of taking all your pay and putting it in your pocket.
mm.
And the only classes of people that did that were drunks, gamblers, and idiots.
Yeah, right.
And yet now, over 90% of us do precisely that with our money, which is we put it all into somewhere we can access. And then we seem to be behaving like either drunks, gamblers, or
Yeah, I like that. And try and get a job anywhere today and say, well, rather than like transferring it to a bank account, can I have it in an envelope? It's not an
correct.
option anymore, right?
Correct. But one of the biggest, the biggest mind blowing exercises we do is to say to people, why do you have a debit card linked to the way you get paid? That's stupid. It makes no sense at all.
Mm,
Why not get paid somewhere where you have no access? Literally
mm,
to a completely different bank with no card access. Because let's face it, you're not to be trusted with that money.
mm.
So why don't we put it somewhere we can't access, and then just transfer a little bit somewhere we can access?
Well, that I think is a good segue to getting back into control. And I'm
Correct.
pleased I'm pleased to report that my pay goes into a bank account at the same bank, but there's no debit. Now I can transfer like you wouldn't
That's
believe,
the problem.
right?
That's the problem with even the barefoot investor. That he did a great job of educating people about separating money, but still said put it all in with the one bank. And that
Mm,
when you have the thought to spend, if you don't have the money there in your account, it takes you can still be standing there at the register and move money and pay it to avoid the embarrassment of not having the money, or
mm,
just buy it instantly.
mm,
And we've all got phones, we can all access our money.
mm.
So
Yes.
so it's the access. Access is one of the most important things, access and visibility. Because even if you go into your bank account and you go, oh, I want to buy this, I wonder if I've got enough money. You look at your bank account and it says you've got, oh, $10 left, but I've got another account here with 2 grand in it.
Yeah.
I kind of do
Yeah.
have enough money, don't I?
Yeah, I got money.
Access and visibility. I can see it and I can move it. Whereas if that money was within a completely different bank and you couldn't see it, and we
Mm.
encourage people to, with the other bank where you get paid, take the bloody app off your phone, like delete it. Write the password down. So you've actually got to go home, find the password so that you can re-enter it to jump online to get the money. Because then you can't access it, you know, when you're down the pub on a Friday night.
Mm. Or give that to a friend and say, if I come to you with a life-threatening illness or a desperate need to feed myself and you can see malnutrition, give it to me. Otherwise,
That's
don't
right.
take any bullshit.
Yeah, well, look, I choose to use personally, we use a bank account structure where we use a thing called a cash management account, and
Mhm.
it's not part of the instant transfer system.
Right.
So on a
Yeah.
Friday night, if I want more money, I can transfer more money on a Friday night. It will
Mm.
arrive in my bank account Monday.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So if you're thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind another schooner, you're going to wait till Monday morning to have it. And you're like, I'm not that enthusiastic about Monday morning schooners.
But you mentioned using a friend and schooners, and I want to draw the analogy is imagine there's a friend you go out with regularly, and
Mm.
imagine you have to call it a night because you've got a podcast to record in the morning. So you decide to call it a night, but you give to your friend your debit card and say, mate, I'm going out, but it was my round next. Take my card, and I'm going to go home and be responsible and have a nice sleep. Would you trust that mate with your card, knowing that he's already had quite a few?
I don't know if this says more about my mates than yours, but almost certainly not.
Yeah. Now think about, would they trust you with their money?
Almost certainly not. I mean, I'd like
Then
to think
why do
more
you
likely, but
trust you with your money?
yeah, there you go.
So once you understand, it's like nobody trusts anyone with the money in that context. But then you go, but then why are you trusting you with your money? Why are you giving that version of yourself who's already had, your 3, 4 schooners in?
Mm,
That person has access to your entire wealth on a banking app.
mm.
Really?
I think only a drunk person would make that decision, to be honest.
So
All
we
right.
make the assumption that, and the same with, my wife loves to spend. She loves to spend money and she can, but she gets, there's an amount of money that's been agreed upon that works for the family budget. She gets that once a month on the first of the month. I don't care what it gets spent on. I don't see what it gets spent on. She chooses where that goes. But then when it runs out, it's finished.
Mm,
And you
yep.
can't get more until next month. Well, actually, weekly. So here's a crazy thing. Most people manage their money also by pay cycles.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
You
we
know,
have we have employees that are like kings and queens for a day and then paupers for
exactly
the
right.
rest.
And now here's the crazy thing, and more and more people are getting paid monthly, and the average in Australia is paid fortnightly.
Mm.
But when in psychology studies, if you give one group of people $1,000 and say that's got to last a month, and another group of people $250 a week for 4 weeks, what do you think happens?
Well, I suspect that the people that are paid more regularly a lower amount are more responsible with it.
Yeah, the people who get paid $1,000 in the entire group would run out of money after 3 weeks of the month,
Mm.
and then be stressed as anything for that fourth week because they realize they actually need to eat.
Yeah, yeah.
And here's the other crazy thing. The other group that get money every week experience the problem of when you've got no cash left in week one. By week four, every single one of them at the end of week four had money left over.
Well, I suppose they had four examples of pain, and the other one only had one example of pain. So there's a faster learning curve, right?
Exactly right. But the fact is, whenever we ask people when they get paid monthly, and we know that we did this ourselves, is that people that get paid monthly will always talk about the fourth week and the nightmare 5 week month. It's like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
And yet there's going to be 4 or 5 week months in a year.
Mm,
And those things are a complete nightmare. And then they'll blame, they'll say, oh, well, I had to use a credit card because of whatever. So most monthly people start using a credit card just simply because it's a way to manage that, and the credit card will go up and down. But now they're not managing money anymore. They've just
mm.
delegated their decision making to the people selling them stuff and the credit card companies.
I want to get a couple of tips from you about getting back in control. Obviously, cash management, different bank to your sort of day-to-day spending debit card. But I wouldn't mind asking you the question in and around property investing and financiers, right? So people want to see
Yeah,
the banks will look at your finance, right? And
correct.
they'll make a decision on how risky you are and what you can borrow. And they tend to look at the HEM analysis. But from your experience as a broker, what difference can it make for someone that has more control of their living expenses and their day-to-day expenses, including those frivolous things from a lending point of view?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the obvious. Firstly, it's common for lenders to ask for credit card statements or to look online and see what your balance is. And if they see that you're either carrying a balance on your credit card or that your current credit card balance is 4 grand, and you're trying to tell them you spend 3 grand a month, they know you're bullshitting.
Yeah.
And they may ask for the statement. If they see all the transactions going through your bank account, and there was a time in 2017, 2018 where almost all banks were saying, we want 3 months transaction history of every account you've got. And then they would say, okay, you're spending this much. You can't tell us that you're spending this much. You're spending this much. And
Mm,
so a typical conversation with so many people, I've had this hundreds and hundreds of times. I'll say, so how much do you spend every month? And they'll go, oh, well, there's the electric and there's the gas and there's the phones. And they do a bottom up budget. And the bottom up items, and including groceries, so let's say they come to 2 grand.
yep.
And then they estimate that the discretionary stuff is a percentage of that. So maybe it's $2,400.
Mhm.
And they say their spending is 2,400. And we go, well, that's interesting because HEM for you is 3 grand.
Mhm.
Let's have a look at your credit card statements. How much do you normally spend on your credit card? Oh, it's 4 grand a month. Well, then you're spending 4 grand a month.
Yeah. So
Where's the,
what's where?
where's the
Yeah.
rest of it?
I mean, I know you had a career as a mathematics guru, but it doesn't take a mathematics degree to understand that.
Well, exactly right. And so you can't very well. And I used to, back in the day before we used to collect lots of statements, I would always say to people, how much do you earn? How much do you save? You're spending everything else.
Mm,
And that figure is way more than HEM.
mm,
And also the second question is then, well, how much do you save? And then when do you dip into your savings? And people always say, oh, I dip into my savings at Christmas, holidays, and when the car rego's due. So you're
mm,
not even saving all of what you say you're saving, which means you're actually spending even more than you first thought, which is way more than HEM. So
mm,
almost everyone spends more than HEM when they're going through normal life. Whereas when you go through the fast and slow system, we encourage people to spend less than HEM or about HEM. But on average, we want, spend half your income, put the other half towards property and everything else. But let's say HEM is 40% of your income. That means there's another 10% that you can put aside for holidays and cars and other things. So put it aside. And then
yep.
it goes down as savings. And a bank will see that as savings because it's going into a savings account. They won't rationalize that you'll spend it later, because the truth is, if interest rates jumped, you wouldn't spend it later. You'd have to
Mm,
do it. But
yes.
now your expenditure is completely controlled and it's pretty close to HEM.
Mm, yeah, interesting. So, in terms of kind of tying as best a bow as you can on it, and of course, go and buy the book "Spending Fast and Slow"
Spending
by
fast
Max
and slow. I
Phelps.
don't know if they recorded as well, but
There
yeah,
you go.
spending fast and slow, available in all good bookstores and Big W. That's
Used to love Sean McAuliffe came out with a book, and he said available in all good bookstores, and even that awful one in Launceston.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to find that book everywhere. Big W, the
But
airport
importantly,
bookshops.
for anyone listening to your podcast, there's a free link on our website to get a free copy. Literally, just pay the postage, and and you'll get a copy of the book for free. Let their friends and family go and buy the copy in Big W, but for your listeners, please, if you can jump in, I'm happy. I'm comfortable with enough with money that I'm not trying to make a fortune off of book sales. I'm desperately trying to educate people into finding a better way and having more confidence with money, not just and knowing where you stand. There's
Well,
very few
that's
listeners, I would imagine. My wife and I could tell you precisely for the entirety of 2024 what my wife and I's variable spending will be.
right.
Precisely to the
Yeah.
dollar. I can't
I
tell you what our fixed expenses are going to be because
yeah.
we'll get different electric bills and things will go up, and I can't tell you what those things are going to be. I've got an estimate for them,
Mm.
but I know precisely what our variable spending is going to be. And most people can't do that.
Yes, and if you can't do that, in the show notes, I will certainly put a link to that book. And thank you for being so gracious for offering that out to people. So, in the best way that you can, what's the best way to close this podcast? There's obviously a lot of material in that book, and you've clearly researched it a lot. You're clearly so hyper passionate about it, and I think when passionate people work on something that's altruistic like this, the world benefits. But what can you leave us with, Max, that we can take? This normally comes out on a Wednesday. I don't know, maybe it's Thursday night shopping tomorrow, and we're getting a little bit itchy. What can you give us that's going to help us in the short term?
The very first thing is if you're using a credit card now, stop. It is not your friend. It is not helping you. It is hindering you. Please stop using the credit card. If you have one and you need one for travel or anything else, put it in a drawer, leave it at home, and then start to then manage money in a better way. That's the first thing. Second thing is stop getting access to your pay. Like put it somewhere else. Start spending from a different bank. And once you get in the habit of going, oh, I got this much every week to spend, and that covers groceries and other things, and this much every month to spend, and that covers everything else, then it's much easier to control what you're doing. And you'll make much more thoughtful decisions about your spending when you know you've got money landing on the first of every month. And I don't care when people are paid, even people are paid monthly in the middle of the month. I say, no, 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 no. The month's money comes on the first. Why? Because if I ask you what's happening in February or what's happening in March, you can tell me everything, the events that you've been invited to, whose birthday's happening, what's happening. And so if you know those things are happening, then you know the money needs to be used for that purpose. If nothing's happening, then blow it on the Louis Vuitton bag or blow it on, the new iPhone or whatever you want to do. It doesn't matter. But you can't do that in the middle of the month. And there's a risk that you spend the money first and then need to spend it again. And
Mm.
unfortunately, money is not something you can spend the same money more than once, not without taking away from your future. And your future self will be so grateful to you that you controlled your spending. You can always control it at a higher level. You can always ratchet it up later. But the trick, firstly, is can you 100% control it? Once you can do that, and then you can build your passive income, get out of the workforce or do what I do, which is go, fuck it, what am I going to do? Retire? What? It's like, what do you want to do? I always ask people the question now and they go, oh, I want to retire by the time I'm 50. I go, excellent. What do you want to do when you retire? And they go, oh, I don't really know.
Yeah, I
Um,
just didn't want to work.
I didn't want to work. I said we've all had jobs that we've hated, but the question is, what do you want to do? And for me, what I want to do is continue working to help people. The way I do mortgage broking is not really mortgage broking. It's more like long-term plan counseling kind of therapy sessions, and trying to help people get ahead. That's really what I want to do for the rest of my life because I love it. And so if any of you listeners have got any benefit from that, then I'd be absolutely delighted. And you've been sitting watching me with a smile on my face the entire time we're talking, because that's, I genuinely love what I do, and I don't have to work if I don't want to, but I choose to because it's fun and I can help people. And I like that.
Well, I can't say without being gracious enough that we appreciate your time, and I'm sure people will get stuff out of that. I've got a lot of notes, and let's be honest, a lot of terrible behaviors that I'm going to race out to unwind pronto and get a copy of that book on the house plus postage. So thank you very much, Max. It's been an absolute pleasure
No,
having you
thanks
on.
so much for having me. I've had an absolute blast. I will enjoy the rest of my weekend. And if you ever want to talk about other stuff, just let me know. There's There's a whole nother book that I published that didn't get promoted as heavily. So there's lots of stuff that I'd love to share with your listeners whenever you think they might be ready.
We'd love to have you back. Absolutely. We'll book it in. Cheers, Max.
Lovely. Thanks so much. Cheers, Mike.
Cheers. Bye-bye.